Hi, welcome. This is Lee, and today we're going to make this mini bee. I'll show you in detail how to make the body and then the wings, and then we'll sew the wings on. This is what you'll need. If you have one of my kits, then you'll have everything you need in here, except for a pair of scissors. Hopefully you have that at home. And I'm using today Lion Brand 24/7 yarn in two colors. I'm using lemon and white for my two colors. It's going to be just like this bee. You need a 3mm crochet hook, a stitch marker to mark the first stitch in each of your rows, just makes it easier that way, a needle to sew in your ends, and then also to sew the wings onto the top of the bee, and then a pair of scissors to cut the various pieces of yarn after you weave in your ends. And you'll also need some stuffing, which is right here, and that will go on the inside of your bee. Finally, you'll need some safety eyes if you're going to use those. That's all we need. Let's get started. The first thing you're going to do is make a magic ring. I have another short video that goes through how to make a magic ring, but we'll do it here as well. You take the end of the yarn and you put it on two of your fingers. You can hold it with your thumb, wrap around those two fingers, cross over that first piece, and then bring the yarn around to the front. Hold it with your fingers. Then take your hook, slide it under that first piece of yarn, over the second piece so you can hook it, pull through the second, under the first, and give it a little twist. Once you have that twist on your hook, put it under that second piece of yarn again, and then pull through the first loop. And that is your magic ring. Our first row will be 6 single crochets into this magic ring or magic circle. I've heard it both ways. So you're going to be working right into this circle, which can be difficult to kind of hold it all together. Try to maybe, don't tighten it up all the way obviously, but if you keep it really loose, it'll be hard to do your stitches. So kind of pull it a little bit. This end piece is what you're going to pull your magic ring tight with. So try to hold it with two of your fingers and insert your hook into the magic ring, yarn over, pull up a loop. Once you're out of the magic ring, yarn over again and pull through those two loops on your hook. We'll do that 5 more times. Insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over. There you go, that's 2. And you just, keep trying to hold it and adjust it as best you can. Insert your hook, pull up a loop. You now have 2 loops on your hook, yarn over again. Now you have 3 stitches. 3 more. 1, 2, oops, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches for your first row. Then you can close your ring. I don't close it all the way yet because then it's hard to see these stitches. But close your ring, and that's your first row. In your second row, you're going to put 2 stitches into each one of these stitches. So you're going to increase all around. An increase is when you put 2 stitches into one stitch. So let's do the first one. If you pull really tight on your magic ring right now, then it might be hard for you to put your hook into the top 2 parts of that stitch, the 2 parts of the V. Remember, you want to go underneath both parts of that stitch. That's why I don't pull it tight yet. I do it later on. Okay, so you insert, yarn over, pull up a loop. You now have 2 on your hook, yarn over, pull through both. That's your first stitch. I like to use a stitch marker on the first stitch of my row, because even when I count stitches, I lose count. This way, I know when I get to the end, and then I can count my stitches and make sure I've done all the stitches I need to. All right, so that was number 1, but we need to do one more in that stitch because we're doing 2 in every stitch. So that's 2. Let's keep going. 2 in the next stitch. 2 in the next stitch. You'll do this all around the row. Just make sure you're getting under the whole stitch, both parts of the V. Now at the end of this row, we should have 12 stitches because we had 6 and we put 2 in each one. That makes 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Great. So for our next row, we're going to do 1 single crochet in one stitch, and in the next stitch then we'll do 2. So we're going to do 1 and then an increase, 1, then an increase, 1, and then an increase all the way around. Let's do a couple of them. 1, that's 1, and again I'm going to put my stitch marker on. And in the next stitch we're going to do 2 stitches. It's an increase. One and an increase. The next stitch. One, then an increase. And we'll do this for the rest of the stitches. I'll meet you when we get to the end. Okay, I'm on my last 2 stitches, so 1 will be just 1 stitch into that stitch from the previous row, and the next one will be 2 because it's an increase. Whoops. At the end of this row, we should have 18 stitches. Now the next row changes a little bit. We're still going to do 1. Our first 2 stitches are going to be 1 single crochet and then an increase. Let me put in my stitch marker. And then an increase. But after that, for the rest of the row, we're going to do 2 single crochets and then an increase. So we'll do 1, 2, and then the next stitch is an increase. 2 stitches in the same stitch. We'll do that for the rest of the row. 1, 2, then an increase. 1, 2, then an increase. 1, 2, increase. We'll have 1 more of that. 1, 2, then an increase. And you see we have 1 stitch left. That's because we started the row with just 1 single crochet and an increase, and the rest of the row is 2, so this is the last single crochet that's left. And the reason we do that is just to shift where the increases are, because if the increases are always right on top of each other, you end up getting a kind of pointy hexagon type of shape. So this helps keep it more of a circle. Our next row will be, we just did a row with 2 single crochets and an increase. This row will be 3 single crochets and then an increase. So we'll do 1, put in our stitch marker, 2, 3, and now an increase. Keep going for the rest of the row. 1 should be 6 times total. 2, 3, increase, 1, 2, 3, increase, 1, 2, 3, increase. Another couple more. 1, 2, 3, increase. Then the last one of the row. 1, oops, get this guy out of here. 2, 3, and then the last stitch will be an increase. Okay, that's the end of row 5, and you should have 30 stitches. I like to count every row because that way if you've missed one or you've made a mistake, you only have to go 1 row back to fix it. For this row, most of the row is going to be 4 single crochets and an increase, but we're going to start it off with 2 single crochets and an increase, and then when we end the row, it'll end with just 2 single crochets, and that'll be the 4. Just shifts things a little bit. So our first group will be 1, will be 2 total, and an increase. So 1, 2, and an increase. And then for the rest of the row, we're going to do 4 and an increase until the very end where you will have 2 single crochets left or 2 stitches left, and you'll put in 1 single crochet in each of those. So let's follow this row. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then an increase in the next stitch. So 2 stitches into that next stitch. And we'll repeat that. 1, 2, 3, 4, then an increase. Keep doing that for the rest of the row.
And I'll meet you at the end. Okay, so we're at our last 2 stitches, and we'll just do 1 single crochet in each stitch, and that's the end of your row.
At the end of this row, you should have 36 stitches, so you probably want to take a moment to count them. The next 2 rows, we're just going to single crochet all around. We're done increasing. This is as big as the bee is going to get, and then we just do the alternating rows of color. So the first the next 2 rows, rows 7 and 8, will just be 36 stitches around. So that's your first stitch. And again, I still like to put my stitch marker in it, because even when I say, oh, I'll keep count, I can count to 36, somehow things happen and all of a sudden you've lost count, and if you don't know where you started, then it becomes much more difficult to go back. So 1, just makes it a lot easier to have a stitch marker. And you don't need this kind of stitch marker. There are a lot of different things that work if you don't have one. You can use a piece of yarn that you just put under your stitch when you start working on it. You can use a paper clip, a bobby pin, all kinds of things. But when I have a stitch marker handy, I like to use that. So I'm just putting in 1 single crochet in each stitch from the row before. I'm not increasing in any stitches. Meet me at the end of this round. Here we are towards the end of row 7. I have just a couple stitches left. You want to still have 36 stitches at the end of this row, and we're going to do another row just like this. You'll notice when you're not increasing or decreasing, this top part will start curling up, and this is when you should keep in mind that this is the back of your work. This is going to be the inside of the bee. This will be where you can see your stitches, will be the outside of your work. So you can always start folding it over that way, so you're working on the right side of your work. Just so you keep in mind, that's going to be the back. That's inside this guy. And this is the front that you will see. So let's do this row one more time, and I'll meet you back towards the end, because we're gonna change colors at the end to start your stripes at the end of row 8. Okay, we're nearing the end of row 8. I have 3 stitches left, and I'm going to put single crochet in 2 of them. We're going to change colors in the last stitch of row 8. So get your second color. Mine will be white for this video, for my stripes, and we're going to start working on the stripes. Now, there's a lot of different ways to change color, and this way is the easiest, but you can see where you change, and it kind of, you can tell that there's a color change. It's not a huge deal, but it's offset a little bit. I like to put my wings kind of on top, have this be my top, so the wings kind of cover up that color change, but that doesn't have to be that way. You can also put it on the bottom so it's less noticeable. There are other ways to do your color changes that have less offset, but for purposes of just starting out, and with this yarn, it's easiest just to do it this way, and it's an easy way to learn. So keep your second yarn handy. We're going to do most of the stitch a regular way. So we're going to insert the hook under both parts of the V like we normally would. We're going to yarn over, pull up a loop, and then you're going to have 2 loops on your hook. At this point, you can drop your first yarn, pick up your second yarn, and you're going to make a loop with that second yarn. Leave somewhat of a tail. I always like to knot my ends once they're inside the piece, so I leave enough of a tail that I'll be able to do that. So you have 2 loops on your hook. You haven't finished your stitch. We're going to take this loop and put it on the hook, and this is what we're going to finish our stitch with. So for the moment, just try to hold on to all that, pull it through those 2. Now, a few things you'll notice. This stitch is super loose, so you have to look behind for your yarn and pull that tighter. So now that stitch is tighter and will hold the new yarn. And then this one, what you're noticing is you have a big loop, and you have to tighten that up too. Somehow I got twisted as well, so let me fix that. So you have to do some fiddling. Because we're using this yellow yarn again in a few rows, I just leave it attached and try not to get all tangled up on it. If you wanted to cut it, I would cut it with a tail, and I would knot it with the end of the white. But for my purposes here, I'm just going to leave it on. Okay, then you're going to make sure you're taking your working yarn, not the end, and we're going to do 3 rows, all the same number of stitches, all 36 stitches again, 3 rows of the white, and then at the end of the 3 rows, at the end of row 11, we're going to change back to the yellow. So let's just start some of the white. This is row 9. We just finished row 8, and we're starting row 9. So I'm doing just single crochets. You can put in your stitch marker. Of course, you should be able to tell the beginning of this row since it's your first one with a different color yarn. But it doesn't hurt to keep the stitch marker in. And I'm just gonna go all the way around with this new color yarn. I'm gonna do this for 3 rows. Okay, I'm coming up towards the end of row 11, which is 36 stitches in my second color. It's my 3rd row of the second color. And when I get to that last stitch, I'm going to pick up that yellow yarn that we had down here. Well, this was my end from my magic circle end. We'll keep that in there for now. Here is the yarn that I left down here. Because we're working with an amigurumi or a plushie that is going to be stuffed and closed up, having kind of ends sitting at different places or bringing it up to work on here and having this yarn just sit in the back there is really not a big deal. It's going to be covered with stuffing, so it's not like you're going to see pieces of yarn everywhere. It's all going to be on the inside of the bee. So we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, 2 loops on the hook, then you're going to put down this white yarn or your second color, whatever that is, pick up your first color again from down here. You can leave it a little loose, doesn't have to be pulled super tightly. Yarn over and make a loop, pull it through. Then I'm going to pull that second color that we had tighter so the stitch tightens up. And now we're going to start with our first color again. So we're going to do 2 rows of 36 stitches each. Just make sure you kind of pull that tight of the second color, and you can do it as you start some stitches. It's a little awkward right now. So we're going to start another row back with your first color, single crochets all around. So that looks pretty tight now. Again, you should be able to see your first stitch of that row because it's a different color, but we'll just use the stitch marker, and we'll do 36 stitches around for the next 2 rows. So that'll be rows 12 and 13.
And I'll meet you at the end of row 13.
We're nearing towards the end of row 13, and it's the second row in that first color. We're going to change back to our second color, which in my case is white, on the last stitch, like we've already done twice. We've changed color twice. All right, here we go. You're going to insert your hook in that last stitch of the row, have 2 loops on your hook, then move that first color aside, pick up your second color, which I just leave attached the whole time since we're still using it. But if that's not comfortable for you, then you can always cut it, but leave enough of a tail that you can knot it with another one of the ends inside the bee, and then you would just reattach a brand new piece a brand new strand of the white yarn. But for now, since I have it attached, I'm just picking it up from where I left it, and I'm pulling it through those 2 loops. Again, your first color yarn is going to be all stretched out, all big there, so you just have to pull that tight. And now we're going to do 3 more rows, each row 36 stitches. So rows 14, 15, and 16 will be in this second color again. And we're just going to do single crochets all around for 3 rows. You should still have 36 stitches at the end of each of these rows, and you're going to do 1 single crochet in each of your stitches all around, just to make the body and the stripes of the bee. Oops. Next time I meet you around will be 3 rows from now, so it'll be towards the end of row 16, and then we'll change back to the first color, and then we can cut off this second color because that's the end of the second color. We're close to the end of the 3 rows with the second color. That's row 16. It's the row we're on right now. Doing my last few stitches. Okay, and on my last stitch, I got my 2 loops, but before my last yarn over, I'm going to pick up that first color again, yellow in my case, and make the stitch, finish the stitch with that. Then I'm going to pull this guy tight again, and we're going to do 2 more rows with the yellow. And I'm just going to start the yellow so it's not just hanging on with this loop, because I'm going to want to show you something after this. So let's just do a couple stitches for this next row, row 17. Actually, we're just going to do 1 more row like this, but for now, I'll put the stitch marker in a moment. So at this point, you can cut your second color because you won't use it again unless you're using it for the wings. Okay. Now what I like to do is find the other end of it down there in the inside and just tie them together. Just make a double knot. I don't pull them that tight because I don't want it to pull on the bee, but I just make a double knot in there. You know, it's not very tightly pulled, but I just double knot it and stuff them both in there. Also, if you haven't pulled your magic ring that tight, now is a good time to give it a pull. This yarn is pretty strong. It won't really fall apart or snap on you if you pull it to tighten up that ring. There are a lot of yarns, like when you use blanket yarn or some other yarns, when you pull it tight, it'll snap. But this yarn isn't bad. If you feel like you're having a hard time closing up your row or closing up your circle, one thing that I sometimes do, I don't really need to here, but I'll show you, is before I get to the end and before this space becomes too small for me to turn it inside and out, I'll put the end piece on my sewing needle and just find a spot that I can run it through that's not that tight. Let's see, what's a good stitch? That's not a great needle. I kind of need a sharp needle for this yarn. I'll just hook it into anything I can find and pull it just so it's a little bit secure. And I'll do that one more time. It's like weaving in your ends generally. You don't have to weave in that end. And try not to get it through the other side. But I get it through a stitch and I give it a little tug. You could remove the needle at that point. If you want to, you could knot this one with one of these other ends that are in here. But now that you've weaved it in, it shouldn't really unravel and you have your hole pretty tight. Okay, so let me put my stitch marker in. We're on row 17. This will be our last row of 36 stitches around. After this, we're going to start decreasing so we can go down the bottom. So I will meet you at the end of row 17. We're at the end of row 17. Just finishing it up. It's just one single crochet in each stitch from the row before. And there you go. This is your B so far. The next row we're going to start decreasing. So you won't have 36 stitches anymore. The next row we're going to go down to 30. So we're going to do 4 single crochets and then a decrease. We're going to do that all around. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, now we're going to do a decrease. I like to do what is called an invisible decrease, and that when you're decreasing, you're taking 2 stitches and making them into 1 stitch. So we've just single crocheted 4, and now we're going to do a decrease. So stitches 5 and 6 are going to be squished together into 1 stitch. To do that, you're going to take your hook that has a loop on it. You're going to insert it in the front loop only of the next stitch. So not both of them, just the front loop. And then you're gonna not yarn over, but you're gonna again insert it in the front loop of the next stitch. So you have 2 front loops on your hook from the next 2 stitches. And yarn over, and you're gonna pull this yarn through the 2 front loops that you had on your hook. And now you have 2 loops on your hook like you normally would for a single crochet. And you're going to yarn over and pull those loops through. And that's a decrease. So you can see with these stitches, you've just put them 2 stitches into 1 stitch. And now we're going to keep doing that across the row. We're going to do 4 single crochet. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the next 2 stitches we're going to decrease. So insert your hook in the front loop of the next stitch, then wiggle it a little and insert your hook in the front loop of the stitch after. Yarn over, pull that yarn through both front loops. You have 2 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through like you normally would on a single crochet. And that's a decrease. Now move on to your next stitch. Make sure you're not on your next stitch. Make sure you're not going into that increase or decrease area. Go to your next stitch, your very next stitch that you didn't pull up a loop on before. So again, we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, decrease, front loop, yarn over, pull through those 2 front loops, yarn over, and pull those loops through like a single crochet. Let's do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you're at your decrease. Front loop in your hook, front loop, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, and pull through. Finish your stitch. keep doing that across the row. 2, 3, 4, decrease, front loop, front loop. That's why this yarn makes it so much easier, because you can really see those loops, and you can also pull them up without it splitting the yarn too much. Your last one, 1, 2, 3, 4, and your last decrease. And as you can see, that's made it a little smaller. You should have 30 stitches around. You can take a moment to count. And we're going to do that similar thing, decreases, for the next couple of rows. So in this row, we're going to do 3 single crochet and then a decrease. So 1, 2, 3, then a decrease by going in the front loop of the next 2 stitches, and then pulling up a loop, going through those 2 stitches, making a single crochet, and do that all around the row. Should be 6 of them. Then keep going around this row. I'll meet you at the end of it. Okay, so we're at our last batch of this row. 1, 2, 3, and then 2, or the next 2 stitches you're going to insert in the front loop for your decrease, and there you go. And that's row 19. So if you're going to be using safety eyes, you should have 24 stitches at this point. You can count. If you're going to use safety eyes, then you can put them between rows 4 and 5. So this is your first row. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and about 10 stitches apart. So if you want to kind of go towards the top, you would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so somewhere around there, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, somewhere around there. So if you're using safety eyes, what you would do, I like to line up the color change on top because I'm going to put the wings there, but again, you can do it however you want. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So between row 4 and 5, what you do is you insert like around there, and before you secure them, you are going to look and see if you like it. These look a little too close together for me, for my taste. I like them a little further apart and a little more on to the side. So I think I may have done it wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I might put them by row 5 versus row 4. So between rows 5 and 6. Let's see. I like that better. Still doesn't look totally even, this guy. Further. So anyway, you play with it a little while before you actually secure it. That looks pretty good. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So between 5 and 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Between 5 and 6. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. About 9 or 10 stitches apart. And then once you get them where you want them to be, you would take this piece, the other piece of your safety eye, and the small hole side, the side that sticks out, you're going to put in first, and you shove it in oops, I dropped it. You shove it in onto the eye. You just put it all the way in as far as it'll go, and you do that on both sides. I'm not going to do safety eyes on this one, so I'm just going to take them out. But you can get an idea where they are. And it's about this point when you can still stick your hand in there easily. It's at that point that you want to do the eyes. Actually, it goes this way. All right. So I'm going to just take these out for now because I'm not going to use safety eyes. Okay, your next row, we're going to do 1 single crochet and 1 decrease. So let's start that off. That'll be row 20. Do one single crochet, and then the next 2 stitches you'll do a decrease. One single crochet. Whoops, before I get too far, I want to put my stitch marker in. So I just did 1 single crochet and a decrease and 1 single crochet. So that's where my stitch marker goes. You could easily get lost in there. 1 single crochet and then another decrease. As this gets smaller, and you just keep doing that all around, as it gets smaller, it gets a little harder to pull up these front loops because it's all just a little bit tighter. Just do your best. And take your time. Single crochet, decrease. We're going to do this round, and I will meet you at the end of the row. Right. You should have 16 stitches at this point, and what we're going to do now is stuff the bee. You could start stuffing the row before because you do have to squish it in there, but we'll just stuff now. Take your stuffing. This is just some kind of polyfill stuffing. I like to break it up because it comes in clumps and it gets too clumpy. So I usually break it up into little pieces and then just start shoving it in. You'll keep doing that till the bee is stuffed the way you like it. You want to stuff it firmly enough that it's a good squishy little thing, but with this yarn I don't stuff it completely tight because these stitches can kind of separate a little bit. I mean, not really, but just the way they look because of the type of yarn it is, that you can see inside the stitches. There are a lot of holes, so my preference is to keep it on the lighter stuffed side, but it's totally a personal preference thing. If you prefer it much more stuffed, then feel free. Needs more than that. And we'll have one more row after this. You can always stuff at the very end. I find it difficult to crochet when the stuffing is really full, so I end up stuffing more on my last row, which can be difficult to shove in. You might need to use your hook like that to help stuff it in if your fingers can't fit in there. Nothing wrong with that. All right. No, I'll still do a little bit more. All right. So it's hard to explain how stuffed it is. It's kind of firm. Like it reaches all the way to the top and does feel pretty stuffed, but at the same time you can still squish this pretty easily. It's not like a really firm ball, like a stress ball. All right, so for our last row of the bee body, we will just decrease all around. So you have 16 stitches. You're going to do 8 decreases. Each one will be 2 stitches, and you'll be left with 8 at the very end. So insert your hook, 2 front loops of the first stitch. I'll still use my stitch marker just so I can keep track of where I am, and I'll do that all around. All right, it gets kind of difficult to get into that front loop. You might have to adjust how you're holding your yarn. It won't be as free-flowing for this, just for this row. Because if it is, then this loop, the loop that's on your hook, ends up getting really big as you try to maneuver into these stitches. So I'll usually hold on a little tighter just on this last row. And I do that really most of the time on my last rows, especially because you also have stuffing at this point, so it's a little firmer. So you just keep doing this the whole way around. So that is it. Next thing we're going to do is close off. So take your scissors and cut off a tail long enough that you can sew, just maybe like 5 or 6 inches. It doesn't have to be super long. We're not going to finish off like we might on some other things. Some other rows, I might take this end, pull it through this loop, and then close it, but that's not really necessary here since we're going to be sewing it all closed. I just pull out that loop. Then take your needle, and for this last row, if you feel like it needs more stuffing, then shove some stuffing in there and push it in with the back of your hook. For this row, we're going to take the front loops of each of these 8 stitches and sew into them. So here's the first one. I'm going to put my needle from the outside to the inside, just in the front loop, and pull. You don't have to pull all the way for each one just yet. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which is where you started, and then you're going to pull this tight to close off the hole. Now, if you were using blanket yarn or velvet yarn or something, and you pulled super duper tight, you could break the yarn, snap the yarn, but this is pretty strong. And then I like to do kind of what we did on this other side. I like to run my needle through a couple of stitches just to secure that hole closed. If we were really weaving in the end properly, you would go in one direction, make sure that's closed, and then weave your needle in another stitch going the other direction to kind of lock it in. So once you've done that and you're comfortable with your hole being secured, you're going to just stick your needle through the hole or through any stitch right next to where you are, because you don't want to stick it in here and then this big string will show, but stick it kind of right where your yarn is coming out of, and then have it come out somewhere else in your bee. Could be anywhere. Make sure it's pulled tight enough, and then you're going to cut your yarn. You can pull this tight, so when you cut your yarn, try not to cut the bee. When you cut your yarn, cut it pretty close, and And if you just move your bee around a little bit, the yarn tail will go inside. So here is the base of your bee, and if you had eyes on it already, then make sure that they're facing up for when you put in the wings. But now we'll make the wings. So for this part, you'll need to decide if you want to make your wings in color 1 or color 2. I think I'll make them in white, the second color of the stripes, and you'll need to make 2 wings, and then we'll sew them on to the top. So we're going to start out with the magic circle or magic ring. Put the end of the yarn on your 2 fingers, hold it with your thumb, swing around the other side of your fingers, and when you come back on the inside of your fingers, cross over the first piece of yarn, bring it over the top, and hook it closed. Then take your hook, put it underneath the first strand of yarn, over the second, hook it, pull it underneath that first piece of yarn, give it a twist. When you've got your twisted loop on your hook, go back under that second piece of yarn and pull it through your loop. Now you have your magic circle or magic ring. So the first thing we're going to do is put 6 single crochets into this magic ring. And remember, we'll do this twice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I need to pull out some more yarn here. It's getting stuck. This only has 4 rows, so we can work up pretty quick. Then for your second row, you're going to put 2 single crochets in each stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to do increases in each one, so you'll end up with 12 single crochets at the end of this row. I'm still going to use my stitch marker. I mean, there's not that many stitches, or rows, but I always find it easier not to have to count accurately. 1, 2, oops, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So you should have 12 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You can pull your circle tighter. Then we're going to do one more increase round. So we'll do 1 single crochet and then an increase. 1, then increase. So 2 stitches, the next stitch, 1 single crochet, then 2 in the next. Did I miss a loop? I think I missed part of my loop. Let's do that one again. Yep. So 1, 1, 2, 1, then 2 in this one. 1, 1, 2, 1, Sometimes I forget to do the second one, even though I'm saying 1, 2. 1, 1, 2. That's why it's always good to count your rows, or count the stitches on each of your rows. Last one. Oops, my yarn is stuck. 1 and 2, and that should leave me with 18 stitches. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Now this is as big as it's going to get for the wing, but I like to do one more row that makes it curl up a little bit, and then once I sew them on, I kind of pinch them. I don't know, I think that looks cute. You could always end your wings here if you didn't want to do that, if you wanted it just to lay flat and not curl up. But I'm going to do, the last row is just going to be 18 stitches all around. Okay, so you're at the end of the row. This is your 18 stitches, and we can end this, finish off this wing, and then we'll make another one. So you're going to cut your yarn. Definitely leave, maybe not a whole foot, but a good maybe 10 inches, 5 to 10 inches for sewing. Depends on how much you want to sew it on. And then once you've cut your yarn and you still have this loop, I like to finish off by sticking the cut end through that loop and then pulling it tightly. It's not that different than doing a chain one, but whatever, that's what I do. And then you still have your beginning tail from your magic circle or magic ring here too, and sometimes I'll weave that in. I like to just sew it through a few stitches and bring it down where the other end of the yarn is. I could use a sharper needle. And then I just let it hang out there. And if I need it, I will use it for sewing. Otherwise, I'll cut it off. But for now, let's go make our second wing, and then I'll meet you back here. So now we have both our wings. This, to me, this is the top of my bee and the front. The back side is a little flatter. If you've gotten confused, this was the side you ended on. This is the side you started on. And it's just a little rounder for the face, which is here. It's kind of flat for the back. So I keep this as the front. And of course, if you've put in safety eyes, then you know exactly where your front is. And this is where the color change goes on. So I kind of like to sew my wings somewhere like that, kind of in between that, maybe about a stitch apart in the yellow section, or the middle section of the stripes. So you just pick one. With a few stitches, you're going to figure out where you want to place it. Right about there. And so I'll start by just sticking my needle underneath a stitch. You can go through a stitch or you can go underneath a stitch. I'll do both, but for this first one I'll pull it through underneath that stitch. And then once you get it in there, you want to adjust it how you want it to look. And then you'll come out of that stitch right here, and then I might put it through another stitch and then through the wing just to secure it a little better. You can sew this however you want. So that's a start. And then I'm just going to go back through it a few times to make sure it's secure. It's not that secure right now. So I'll go back to the back where the working yarn is coming out of. and I'll go back down into the bee and up the other side, just so I can secure this a few times. And I still left this piece of yarn from our beginning magic circle on. Again, I always feel like, well, what if I want more to sew? It doesn't really happen. I'll probably just end up cutting it off or tying it with this other part of the yarn, and then securing them both inside the bee. And that's it. You just keep doing that, you know, maybe four times, 5 times, depending on how securely you're sewing it. Now let's sew the other wing. Just do the same thing we just did. You can place it where you want to. Probably right around there. Maybe a stitch in between. Let's see what I did on this guy. Yeah, there's about a stitch and a half in between those two. And he looks pretty cute. So I'll probably do the same. You can do them much wider if you want. That would look cute. Or you can do them right up on top of each other in the same stitch. That also would look cute. But I don't know. I tend to do it about a stitch apart. So probably closer to there. Let's see where that takes us. I can work with this. Just going to bring it back around from the other side. Pull it through. Let's see. I think I want it to sit like that so it's more even with the other wing. So for the moment, I'll just weave it under another stitch. And then sew it through a stitch here. And that'll should get me the right spot. All right. That looks pretty good once I get it all sewn in. So I'm just going to run this through a couple more times to make sure it's secure. Okay, so my wings are sewn in. This guy looks a little bulky, but I can fix him. All my ends are in the same place. What I'll do now is take the ends from one wing, both ends. You can fit them both in your needle at the same time. That's good. If not, you'll do them separately. And I'm going to stick them right down into the bee and out somewhere else. And I'll pull it through all the way. Okay, so now it's pulled through somewhere else. And this is where I like to knot them. Once I've pulled it through, I like to knot these. Double knot or triple. Double should be fine. And then I thread them both again. Just to make sure they're secure. And I go right back in the hole I came out of, so you gotta figure out what hole that was. And out another hole, out somewhere else, and make sure to pull that knot on the inside. There you go. And you can close up that hole. So you have a knot in the inside. And now you can get your scissors and cut your yarn. Make sure that goes inside. We'll do the same thing with the other side. Meet you back here. So here's your bee, as we have them so far. All our ends are weaved in. Now I didn't use safety eyes, but I just stuck them in here so I could see about where I wanted to put my embroider eyes because I'm just going to sew on my eyes, but I like to use safety eyes just to kind of test it out. So this is how your bee looks right now. Looks pretty good. If you use safety eyes, then you're done. If you need to sew on your eyes, then you can do that next. I think the hardest thing about sewing on eyes is making them even, but I think that's also the hardest part of putting on safety eyes because they don't always look even to me either. And you know, it's kind of okay if your eyes aren't completely even. Everything is unique and it's your own, and it's going to be cute no matter what. So that's about where my eyes are going to be. 4 or 5, between 5 and 6, a little higher than halfway in the circle. You know, if you split your circle in half, I'm putting the eyes just a little bit above that on the wing side, towards the wings. So I'll just show you what I'm going to do. I have my black yarn on my needle, and you can stick it in anywhere. I like to stick it in either in the middle here or just off to the side, and you run your needle through to where you want the eye to be, like right there, but I'll run it through underneath that so then I can sew over it. And I pull in a lot of yarn, mostly because I like to do both eyes together because I'm lazy to cut and weave in all those different ends. But also, you know, with a little bee like this, it just is easier to just do it all in one shot. So I'm going to go about a stitch above this. I feel like this might be too high. The other problem with embroidering or sewing on eyes is oftentimes I end up not liking the way they look, and I'll do it a whole bunch of times over and over again. I'll take out this yarn and start all over, and that is very time consuming. But if I don't like where the eyes have come out or how they've come out, I just redo it. This is fine. You just sew it a few times, probably like, this guy's so little. This is my 3rd time around, but I think I probably will need to do maybe 5 or 6. And what you do with your finger or your thumb is you kind of direct the thread, the yarn, where you want it to be. So it ends up not always on top of each other, but you kind of end up making more of a circle shape, or I don't know, maybe it's more of an oval. So this is my 4th time through. That's a decent size eye for this little guy, but I'll just do one more. And because you've stuffed it already, you end up getting all this stuffing coming out, which is fine. At the end, you'll pick it off. It's not a big deal. Yeah, so this is going to be my last one, and when I run it through, I'm going to take it out, take the yarn out somewhere over here so then I can work on the second eye. I insert it back to the same spot, and I'll bring it out over here. Don't worry, we're not going to have this black line here everywhere. It's just we're going to go right back in that same hole once we decide where we're putting our other eye. All right, so that's one. And the second one, yeah, that still looks about right. You know, you can look at your piece from different angles, see where you like the eye, but that's about right. So what I'm going to do is take my yarn exactly in the same spot where it just was, so it disappears once we pull it through, and bring it over about there, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that's right, but we shall see. Okay, looks maybe a little higher. So I might need to go down a little further on this eye. We'll see. I'll do 1 stitch, and then if they're not even, then either I'll take out this second eye where I've started, or I'll just sew it a little differently. Oh, that's actually fine. Okay, so I think I went through 4 times. That's what I'll do again on this side, and then we'll end on the 5th. I'm going to go down one more time and then back out over here. I'm going to work my way back to that other stitch. So let's put this on this side. See if I can make these look more alike. Not sure how that guy got so slanted, and now this one is a little more slanted. So not too bad. So I go wherever my yarn came out, I'm going to go right back in that same hole, and I'm going to take it all the way, if I can. If I can't get the needle all the way back to where I started, then I might do this a couple times till I can get right back in that same hole, because you're going to want to tie these off together. I think I'm in the same spot now. Yep. So you're going to cut your working yarn, and you know, if you can cut it kind of evenly with your other yarn, it makes it easier to sew. And I tie these in a knot right here, and then another knot, so double it up. Then again, if you can thread them both together, great. If you can't, not a big deal, just do one at a time. But make sure you get all the strands of both pieces of yarn. And then we're just going to go right back in that same hole and pull it out anywhere else. It's a little close, but that's fine. Pull through the knot. There we go. And now here at the bottom, you can cut your yarn, squish it around to hide your end, and there you go. Now your bee is complete. Great job. Thanks for watching.